So good evening. Thanks for joining me again. It is a cold, dark, wintry evening in Devon, and I just got back from warm, sunny Kenya just a couple of days ago. We went from 28 degrees Celsius to 1 degree Celsius. After I've talked about some books for a bit, you'll be able to see the footage that my partner took with his fancy camera whilst we were on safari. But first of all, I wanted to talk about my trip to a Kenyan bookstore and the books that I bought there, a little mini holiday haul. So as you know, I like to buy books whilst I'm on holiday. They're kind of part souvenir and part learning about the place that I'm going. Ideally, I buy them near the beginning of the holiday so I can read it throughout the trip. Didn't work out that way this time, just because we were out in the middle of nowhere for the first 8 days of the trip, and it was only on the last day, the 9th day, that we had the day in Nairobi. Before we even headed off, I did have a quick Google about English language bookstores in Kenya. The results were partly disappointing and partly confusing though. There are two main types of bookstores that came up on Google Maps when I searched this. First of all, religious bookstores, so Bibles, Bible study, Christian textbooks, that kind of thing. And then the second result that came up a lot was called Textbook Centre. So that was a bit confusing, first of all, and I'm sure if you knew which suburbs to zoom in on, you might be able to find just regular bookstores, whether like independent or chain or whatever, but I didn't know which suburbs to zoom in on, so those were the only two results I got. And I didn't worry too much about it at the time because I just knew that for the first 8/9 of the trip, we wouldn't even be anywhere near these places. So we went to 3 different safari locations, and 2 of them were middle of nowhere, but one was a bit closer to civilization. It was on Lake Naivasha, and so it was near the towns of Nakuru. And so I did again have a quick Google search around there, but again just only got results mostly about Christian Bible bookstores. So I hadn't really pinned my hopes on finding anything actually out there. So I did try and find something to read before I left. And again, it's just very reliant on Google. It's just like Kenyan authors writing in English, that kind of thing. The results were mostly not my preferred genre, though. It was big, like historical fiction, heavy themes, lots of stuff around like war and colonialism, often with like a coming of age kind of story built within that kind of timeline. And that's fine occasionally, but I was looking for, my usual normal genre fiction choices. But I was sure that there must be Kenyan authors out there writing, thrillers and romance and folklore based stories. I just wasn't having much luck finding them. Then things took a turn for the better. So in our second location in the Mugie Conservancy, the hotel we were staying at had a leisure room, including a little library. Most of it was just English classics. But it seemed that a former guest had left a book there, and it's called The Hour of the Red God by... Of course, I don't remember who by off the top of my head, because I wasn't able to keep the book. But it was by Richard Crompton. So it's not the perfect match, my kind of read the world challenge, because he is not Kenyan. He's British and he moved to Kenya in 2005. So certainly lived there a long time. I think still does live in Nairobi, as far as I can see online. So it's the kind of, not the ideal choice of being, someone who's born and raised in a country, but people move around. So I don't hold it too strict about that requirement for the Read the World challenge. So anyway, it is a detective story. So it's in the classic case of following one main detective character through multiple books, and this is the first book in the series, Detective Molel. So the premise is that I don't think he's actually got the rank of detective at the beginning of this book. I think he's a sergeant. So anyway, he is a Masai man, so he used to live on the Masai Mara as a youth, but as an adult he moved to Nairobi to join the police. And so lots of the book is around the kind of cultural conflict of the westernized Nairobi and his upbringing and the kind of changes he had to go through in order to fit with the police force. So it's a recurring theme throughout the book about this tribalism and conflict, particularly around the election, about like the different candidates from different tribes and who, you know, do you vote for your own tribe even if they're like not the best politician, or do you vote for somebody who might be a better politician but isn't from your tribe, that kind of thing. And the plot of this book then, that, I mean, that's the general themes, but the plot of this specific book is that the main case that he's investigating is around the death of a young woman. So she was murdered and her body was found in the park. And it seems that she's a Masai woman, so that's why he is, in particular, is brought onto the case. He is like in a semi-disgraced state. He was like demoted and moved to a different department because of something that happened in the past. I think it's... Okay, so I should explain, I only got 50% of the way through this book. So all I'm telling you is just the first half and possibly things are wrong. But yeah, so he did some like anti-corruption whistleblowing in the police force, so he got demoted. But then when this woman gets murdered, he gets brought onto the case. So kind of put back into his old department, but with a new partner who's from a different tribe. So it's like two sides working together. And so they're investigating this murder and they're like, is it related to her job because she was a sex worker? Is it related to a man she was seeing? Like, who is this like mysterious powerful patron who she was quite scared of? Is it something to do with this religious group that she was supposedly kind of, she'd come under their wing and actually she wasn't doing the sex work anymore, she was going through some kind of rehab situation? And so there's like a suspicious kind of mega church that he investigates, and that's as far as I got. Because yes, alas, we were only in Mugie for 3 days. So I got halfway through the book and then I had to put it back. I considered trying to keep it, but considering it was so different to all the other books available in the library, I was like, can't remove this one good contemporary book. So I have ordered it on eBay. Interestingly, it has two names. So the American imprint is called The Hour of the Red God, but that's what was on the shelf there. But in the British printing, it's called The Honey Guide, which is a name that made no sense to me at the beginning. But as you read the book, you find out why, maybe why it's called that. I'm not entirely sure. So that should be arriving any day now. And then I can pick up where I left off and carry on. But yeah, it was kind of walking that line of, it's clearly written for a Western audience, so there's a lot of educational information about the Masai and about Kenya and about the different tribes and different cultural practices, particularly in the Masai, and kind of fitting that all in with like talking about Kenya's political situation at that time and the mega churches and the corruption element to society and the police force and the politics. But it still did have an interesting plot, and I do really want to finish it off. So that was the first Kenyan book I read. And then on our very last day, as we were travelling back from Masai Mara to Nairobi, we had 12 hours between arriving back in Nairobi and our flight home. We had a transfer arranged to take us to the airport, but we couldn't check in for like 8 hours. So we paid extra to hire that car and driver for the day, and he showed us around Nairobi, so we saw a little bit of, you know, it's a modern mega city. We went to the National Museum, and then I requested that we go and find a bookstore. My results on Google Maps have been so disappointing. I just thought, you know, I have to ask a local. That's the only way I can get this information I want, just for from his recommendation. And it's because of him that now I know, it turns out the textbook centre is not just for textbooks, despite its name. It is, I'd say, 60 to 70% based around the academics and textbooks and the Kenyan curriculum and like school supplies and all that kind of jazz. It's kind of like a W.H. Smith, if you are British and know what I mean by that. But yeah, the remaining side of the store is regular books. It's always interesting for me to see which international authors end up in a local bookstore, and smidge disappointing to see it's things like Colleen Hoover. What else was there? There was like the Rebecca Yarros Dragon Fantasy series. Can't remember off the top of my head, but I'll show you the video clips I took, and you'll recognise the big authors. But then they had what I always really appreciate, which is a local author section. Although their definition of local is basically just all of the middle of Africa. So like sub-Saharan, but I don't think I only saw anything from South Africa. But lots of Kenya and Nigeria. That made up the bulk. Not surprising. So let's have a little mini haul. I'll show you what I bought. So in no particular order, and then I'm just going to read the blurbs out to you. As always, I was trying to find and only buy books that I'd not heard of on BookTube or Instagram or anywhere. So anything like, they had quite a few books from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, but I can buy those in Waterstones, so I wasn't going to buy that. So personally, I'd not heard of any of these books before. So first book, The House of Rust by, apologies in advance for any mispronunciation, Khadija Abdallah Bajaba. When Aisha's fisherman father goes missing, she takes to the sea on a skeleton boat to rescue him. Guided by a talking scholar's cat who sparks her interest in the mysterious House of Rust, she encounters 3 monsters lurking beneath the waves. All Aisha wants is for things to return to normal, but a showdown with the father of all sharks looms, and at home, things only grow stranger. Set amid the diaspora Hadhrami culture in Mombasa, Kenya, The House of Rust is a standout debut by a marvellous new voice. I promise if I talk about these books in the vlog, I will listen to audio clips of the pronunciation for the words I can't say off the top of my head. So yeah, I think, like, as I say, fabulous. So magical realism won the Ursula K. Le Guin Prize for Fiction. Cool. Good start. Then Housewoman by Adora Nwora. As I say, we're now straying from Kenya a bit, but one day in Lagos, young dancer Ike Mifuna is put on a plane to Houston to meet her new husband, Na. Promises are made to her about her education, about the man she'll marry, about her freedom. None of them are kept. A few months later, self-professed feminist Na finds a beautiful woman cooking in his parents' kitchen. They tell him Ike Mifuna is his wife, there to give them the grandson they've been waiting for. She appears obedient, malleable, but she is no ordinary wife. In the Texas heat, patience runs on short supply, and the atmosphere in the house becomes increasingly strained, increasingly violent. Desperate people do strange things. ... There we go, that one. So, domestic thriller, it seems. Then, okay, this is one of the 2 non-fictions I got. So it's called I Didn't Do It For You by Michelle Wrong, or possibly Michaela Wrong. Again, need to look up the names. A story of betrayal, belligerence and bloodshed. I Didn't Do It For You is the portrait of a country torn by war and buffeted by the capricious manoeuvrings of foreign powers, which remains defiant throughout. It is a story that reveals the colonial and superpower legacy of a continent. No country better embodies Africa's battered history than Mulish Eritrea, still bearing the imprint of its occupiers, including the continent's best espresso and worst rail system. It has served as a launch pad for fascist Italy's imperial ambitions, a US spy base, and a pawn in the Cold War's proxy aggressions. The author brilliantly exposes the conflicts and comedy of 20th century Africa while employing her acute eye for incongruous detail. Along the way, she meets blah, 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 blah. Oh, the subtitle is How the World Used and Abused a Small African Nation. Again, I know, not Kenya, but I don't really see myself ever visiting Eritrea, so I'm interested in reading about it. And probably, I never would have found this book otherwise. Will I ever read a non-fiction about a country I'll never visit? We shall see. Oh, here's the other non-fiction. Africa is Not a Country by Deepo Faloyin. You already know these stereotypes. So often Africa is depicted simplistically as an arid red landscape of famines and safaris, uniquely plagued by poverty and strife. But in this funny and insightful book, Deepo Faloyin offers a much-needed corrective. He explores a wide range of subjects, from each country's colonial heritage to lively food and football rivalries and the dangers of stereotypes in popular culture. Yada Yada celebrates the energy and fabric of the continent's different cultures and communities in a way that has never been done before. I will admit I was quite drawn in by the title. And the cover's not bad either. When I struggle with the words on the blurbs, I have to promise you, it's half the time it's my pronunciation, but half the time, I'm losing my near vision. I did have my birthday whilst we were away on holiday, so yes, I am rapidly approaching middle age. And how far behind am I on my 40 before 40 challenge? We shall find out soon. Anyway, next one is The Havoc of Choice by Wanjiru Koinange. 2007, Kenya. Long held captive by her father's shadow of corruption, Kavata has spent her life suffocated by political machinations. When her husband decides to run in the next election, these shadows threaten to consume her home. Unable to bear this darkness, Kavata plots to escape as her family falls apart. So too does her country. In the wake of Kenya's post-election turmoil, Kavata and her family must find their way back to each other across a landscape of nationwide confusion, desperation, and heart-rending loss. So, deals with the same election that Hour of the Red God did. And apparently this was a national bestseller. Printed on sticker. And so, the last book left is a bit out of character for me because I bought a romance. I just thought it looked really cute. So this is Let the Games Begin by Rufaro Faith Mazarura. Too many R's in that for me. It's the Summer Olympics and Zeke and Olivia are here to win. Zeke Moyo is the star athlete of Team GB. He's in Athens to claim the title of fastest man in the world. Olivia Nkomo runs on ambition. She's just landed the role of a lifetime behind the scenes. When the two collide, literally, on the first day of the games, and something unexpected begins. But the competition is stirring up uncomfortable memories from Zeke's past, and Olivia's dream job is turning into a nightmare. Will they fall at the last hurdle, or could running beside the right person change the whole game? No. And the subtitle is 2 Winners, 1 Hot Summer, ... That's a really cute, nice cover. And that's it. That was my selection. There you go. I could have bought a lot more. I spent quite a while in the bookshop and had to control myself, partly because of cost. These aren't actually particularly any cheaper than the UK. So 6 books and they were about £63 total. I haven't actually checked the RRPs, but you know, that feels about the same as the British cost. And of course I was limited by my luggage allowance. Actually, the good thing about only going to Nairobi on the last day was because we were taking small internal flights, we were limited to 15 kilos in soft-sided duffel bags as our luggage on the small planes. But on our international flight home, of course, I had the full 25 kilos. Not that I was anywhere near it. I had 8 kilos on the way out, and then I came back with 13 kilos. But it was just, good to know that I didn't have to worry about weight restrictions for once. So yeah, apart from book shopping, it was really all about the safari. Like I said, we went to 3 different sites. So the first one was called Loldia House. These were all through a company called Governor's Safari. So yeah, Loldia House on Lake Naivasha was the first stop. We were there for 2 nights. That was really all about the water birds and the lake. There was a small conservancy, but it didn't have many of the big animals because it just didn't have the land to sustain them. And then we also did a day trip to Nakuru National Park during our time there. Then we moved on to Governor's Mugie in the Mugie Conservancy, which was like heaven. So luxurious, so bougie. And then we saw the Mugie 5 there, which are like 5 endangered species that they do exist elsewhere, but this is the only site that they're all 5 of them together. That was our first leopard spotting, was whilst we were in the hide at Mugie. So that was very rare and very cool. It was also our first lion spotting on our last day, but my goodness, they were hard to find. We got within 20 meters before we spotted the lions, and they were up on this like really rocky landscape. But yeah, a lot of time at Mugie was spent reading that book, lounging around, eating fabulous food, in our little cottage. It was could have stayed forever. And then we moved on to the Masai Mara, to Little Governor's Camp there. That was actually a slight disappointment, going from like super bougie Mugie to just like normal level of luxury in the Mara. But, you know, it was still great to like be under canvas for a while. So we had 3 nights at Mugie and 3 nights at Mara. And, you know, there was no separation between the animals in the camp. So like the hippos would go around at nighttime, and during the daytime, the warthogs would be scurrying around the place. And we went out on lots of game drives there. Saw more lions. We did manage to see all of the big 5. Actually, even before we went to the Mara, we saw them between Naivasha and Mugie. But it was still nice to see even more animals. Saw another leopard went at the Mara, as well as like a serval cat. That was cool. We hadn't seen those in either place before. And a few like extra cute animals like the banded mongoose. There are lots of birds in all the sites really. I don't have it up here in my office, but they did give us a booklet with all the animals of Kenya, and so it had 3 columns, so one for each of their sites, and you would tick off which animals you'd seen. And then, like I said, we were there for my birthday, so the staff paraded round the mess tent and with carrying a cake and singing and dancing, and presented it to me on my birthday dinner time. That was very nice. I haven't had a birthday cake in years and years. Like, we either always go to Hawaii or we go overseas for my birthday. And since it's just the 2 of us, like, we're not going to get cake just for 2 people. So yeah, that was a novelty I haven't had in, at least 6 years, I'd say. And then so the cake got divvied up amongst all the other guests and the staff. It's great. And this, and comparing it to our Japan holiday, which, like I said at the beginning of that video, was quite hectic and like busy. This was a good balance between like relaxing and chilling and like lounging on a deck, reading a book, or like watching the birds through my binoculars, versus like activities stuff. And the food was amazing. I'm a vegetarian, and so I was slightly concerned about what the food might be like, but because this was all through like an all-inclusive thing, I know that they're used to catering to Westerners, and it was, really delicious food. And 2 of the sites had little gardens, so it was very like farm to table kind of food. And they often put like an East African twist on the dishes. So yeah, if you want to go on safari, I highly recommend Governor's. I would say maybe do the Masai Mara first and make your way up the luxury scale. So maybe go the Mara, Naivasha, and then Mugie. If I was to redo it, that's what I do. I do it in that order. I just, we didn't know at the time that we booked. And I think we spent a good amount of time in each place and total. I would maybe spend 1 extra day at Naivasha just so we could have gone to Crescent Island, which is the highest density of wildlife in Kenya, like per square meter. And there were also some like mountains that you can walk up there. And there was another national park called Hell's Gate, which has thermal activity. But yeah, amazing holiday. I'm going to do this bit as a voiceover, so you'll be able to see the clips from Kris's camera. It was really expensive though. If you're considering a safari holiday, make sure you have the budget. It was round about £6,000 each, not including our flights, because they were paid for with a voucher. But that's the kind of budget we're talking about if you're considering a similar trip. I definitely do a safari holiday again in the future, but probably a different country, I think. The reason we chose Kenya is because British Airways flies direct from Heathrow to Nairobi, so that's kind of made the decision for us. One couple there did recommend we go to Botswana next time, so who knows, maybe. But anyway, I've waffled on enough. And let me know if you've read any of these books that I bought and any you think I should prioritize. Thanks very much. Have a nice evening. Bye.